In this video, we dive into the most disturbing and unforgettable deaths ever recorded at Niagara Falls. These are the true stories of individuals who stood at the edge of danger and never returned. But before we descend into the depths of these chilling tales, let's first explore what makes Niagara Falls such a magnet for both the wonder and fatal miscalculation. On a warm summer day in August 1981, among the crowd stood 28-year-old Dunia Sayegh, a recent immigrant from Lebanon, holding her 2-month-old son, Hesham, close to her chest. She and her husband, Rafik, along with their 3 children, had come from Toronto for a day of sightseeing near one of Canada's most iconic landmarks. At first, it was a joyful family outing, until the unthinkable happened. While Rafik briefly stepped away to buy film for their camera, Dunia stood near a stone railing just 12 feet from the edge of the Horseshoe Falls. Moments later, witnesses would recall seeing her sway unsteadily. She clutched her head and cried out that she was dizzy. And then, chaos. To the horror of onlookers, baby Hesham slipped from her arms and disappeared over the side. A scream pierced the air as Dunia reached desperately toward the railing, but it was too late. The infant had been swept into the rushing waters, carried by the fierce current, and plummeted over the 162-foot drop. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Paramedics arrived and transported her to Greater Niagara General Hospital, where she was heavily sedated due to the shock. At first, police treated the case as a tragic accident. Dunia claimed she had felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Witnesses backed her account, describing her visibly unsteady stance and panicked cries after the fall. Despite intensive efforts by boat, crews, and divers, Hesham's body was never found. On July 4, 1930, a humid summer afternoon in Buffalo, New York. Among the crowds gathering near Niagara Falls that day stood 46-year-old George Stathakis, a Greek immigrant, a chef by trade, and a self-proclaimed philosopher. But George had not come to the falls as a tourist. He had come with a mission, one that he believed would unlock the next chapter of his life. For years, George had been writing a series of philosophical essays. He believed he had uncovered deep metaphysical truths, ideas he felt the world needed to hear. But like so many dreamers, he lacked the resources to publish his work, so he came up with an unconventional solution: survive a trip over Niagara Falls in a barrel. If he lived, he believed the fame and financial gain would allow him to fund his writings and share them with the world. But George's plan wasn't just a publicity stunt, it was a calculated risk. He designed a massive custom barrel, 10 feet long, over 5 feet wide, and weighing close to a ton. It was reinforced with steel and lined with thick wood and shock-absorbing springs. Inside, he placed an oxygen tank, blankets, and a small light, provisions for the hours he might spend trapped beneath the falls. He even brought a companion, his pet turtle Sonny, whom he believed brought him luck. At 2:30 p.m., with hundreds of onlookers and reporters watching, the barrel was launched into the upper Niagara River. Spectators watched with a mix of awe and dread as the enormous cylinder was swept into the churning current and carried toward the thunderous brink of Horseshoe Falls. Moments later, it disappeared. The crowd erupted, some gasping, others cheering, unsure of what to expect. Then, after a few agonizing seconds, the barrel re-emerged at the base of the falls. It appeared intact, but something was wrong. Instead of floating downstream, the barrel became lodged behind the cascading current of water, wedged in place by the relentless force of the falls and the jagged rocks beneath them. Rescuers watched helplessly. The location was too dangerous for retrieval. All they could do was wait and hope the current would eventually dislodge the barrel. 3 hours passed, then 6, then 12. Inside, George Stathakis was sealed in complete darkness. His oxygen was limited. His fate now rested in the hands of nature and time. 18 hours after his fall, the barrel finally came loose and drifted into calmer waters. Rescue teams rushed to retrieve it. When they finally pried open the hatch, they found George's lifeless body inside. He had suffocated hours earlier. June 5, 1990, and 28-year-old Jesse Sharp of Ocoee, Tennessee, was not just any thrill-seeker. He was a highly skilled kayaker with over a decade of experience navigating the unforgiving white waters of the Ocoee River. To Jesse, kayaking wasn't just a sport, it was a calling. He had danced with danger more times than most, threading his narrow boat through rapids that would scare off even seasoned professionals. But Niagara Falls, that was another level entirely. While others who had gone over the falls wrapped themselves in barrels, inflatable contraptions, or jet skis, Jesse had something different in mind. He would go over in a Red Dancer C1 canoe, a sleek vessel more often mistaken for a kayak, and he would do it alone, with no helmet, no life vest, and no safety team waiting below. He studied the falls obsessively. He believed the key to survival lay in velocity. By launching himself at high speed toward the brink, he hoped to project cleanly off the lip of the Horseshoe Falls, clear the jagged rocks below, and land in deep water, navigating the powerful eddies to a safe recovery point 4 miles downstream of Lewiston, New York. As Jesse paddled into the upper Niagara River that afternoon, everything about his plan began to unravel. Power station workers spotted the lone kayaker and, realizing what was about to happen, quickly began reducing the water flow, hoping to delay or derail his approach. But Jesse had already made up his mind. Eyewitnesses later recalled seeing him raise his paddle in triumph as he neared the brink. It was 1:45 p.m. Then, he vanished. Seconds later, the roar of the falls gave way to silence. Spectators leaned over railings, scanning the swirling waters below. For a moment, nothing. Then Jesse's paddle surfaced. Moments later, his red kayak, dented but intact, bobbled into view. But Jesse Sharp himself was gone. Search and rescue efforts were launched immediately. Boats were deployed and helicopters scanned the river, but the area below the falls was too treacherous even for the most experienced divers. Jagged rocks, powerful undercurrents, and unpredictable whirlpools made recovery almost impossible. Days passed, then weeks. There was no sign of Jesse's body. To this day, Jesse Sharp's remains have never been recovered. He became the 13th person known to intentionally attempt a plunge over Niagara Falls, one of the few to do so without any kind of protective enclosure, and one of many who paid with their life. By the mid-1990s, Niagara Falls had seen its share of daredevils, but few were driven by the kind of purpose Robert Overacker carried when he stood at the edge of the Niagara River on October 1st, 1995. Robert wasn't just another thrill-seeker chasing adrenaline, he was on a mission. A 39-year-old stuntman from Camarillo, California, Robert had trained extensively, graduating from stunt school and spending 7 years preparing for a feat that, in his eyes, would do more than shock the world. It would bring attention to a cause he deeply cared about: homelessness in America. His plan was as daring as it was dangerous. He would launch himself off the brink of the Horseshoe Falls on a jet ski and parachute to safety using a rocket-propelled deployment system. An audacious combination of machinery, timing, and courage. Onlookers had no idea what was coming. That afternoon, the riverbanks were crowded with tourists enjoying a clear autumn day. But among the hundreds of people were a few with a very different purpose. They were there to watch Robert make history. His stepbrother and a close friend stood by with cameras in hand, ready to capture a moment that had taken years to plan. Robert's jet ski wasn't just a vehicle, it was a billboard. Attached to the back was a sign that read, "Save the Homeless," making it clear that this was more than a stunt. It was a statement. At 12:35 p.m., he revved the engine and entered the river just upstream from the Canadian Niagara power plant. Wearing a black wetsuit and a specially designed parachute pack, Robert maneuvered confidently through the turbulent waters. As he approached the brink of the falls, witnesses described him as calm, even graceful, his jet ski cutting clean lines through the foaming current. For a brief moment, it seemed as though everything might go according to plan. Then, in a flash, he launched himself into the air. The rocket activated, the parachute detached, and everything went horribly wrong. Instead of deploying properly, the chute separated entirely from Robert's body. Spectators screamed as they watched him plummet 167 feet down into the unforgiving cauldron below. There was no glide, no slowing of descent, just a freefall into the abyss. From the deck of the Maid of the Mist, crew members watched in stunned silence. For a moment, some thought he might still be alive, confusing the churning water with movement. But as they approached, it became tragically clear. The impact had been fatal. Robert was recovered from the river within minutes, but despite the rescue team's best efforts, he was pronounced dead at Greater Niagara General Hospital. The injuries from the fall had made survival impossible. Niagara Falls, a place of awe-inspiring beauty where nature displays its raw power in a constant thunderous cascade. But beneath the mist and wonder lies a silent witness to decades of daring, desperation, and unspeakable loss. From adventurers chasing immortality to innocents caught in tragic moments, the falls have seen the full spectrum of the human experience. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're committed to sharing real stories that explore the extraordinary, the tragic, and the unexplainable. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.